Welcome back to the Cubbies Crib podcast powered by Fansided. I am Jordan Campbell. With me, as always, is my partner, Jacob Meisner. Jake, I'm noticing a theme with these Thursday podcasts that we do. It always seems to be that the Cubs are back. Last week, we were talking about the Cubs taking 2 of 3 against Tampa Bay. This week, a little bit more impressive. They take 2 of 3 from the Philadelphia Phillies after a Monday game that kind of looked like a doomsday scenario. Javier Assad got blown up. The offense did score, but it was all in garbage time. But they bounced back on Tuesday and Wednesday. Jake, quickly thinking back to the series, what was your biggest reaction?
Relief, probably. It felt like a long time coming. Like this team, I know some fans didn't like Craig Counsell just saying, "Hey, this is a really talented team. They're going like we're going to score runs. It's just let them work through it." And like that's kind of how I looked at it. Is there was no way this team was going to keep being that bad offensively long term. And did I have them pulling off you know, dusting the bats off against the Phillies? Absolutely not. Definitely an exciting turn of events, and yeah, it was great because like there were wins for everyone in the lineup during this series, and I think that heading into this weekend, like it's just nice to feel like you got some momentum. You're back to 500. You're within a game and a half in the division. Like a lot of things coming up, Cubs after an impressive week in Philly.
I thought what was really impressive was, like you mentioned, top to bottom, everyone in the Cubs lineup kind of did their thing. It was almost a story of two different teams because on Monday we saw the impact that someone like Kyle Schwarber has on your team, that his bat is just able to take control of a game, flip it on its head. And I was watching that game. I'm like, man, that's exactly what the Cubs lineup is missing. But then we go to Tuesday, we go to Wednesday, and beyond just the starting nine, the Cubs have multiple players on the bench actually performing well. Michael Conforto is off to a pretty impressive start. Miguel Amaya, my secret pick for potentially being an all-star this year, continues to hit. Matt Shaw had a good series. So the Cubs might not have that impact hitter, but I feel like 1 through 13, they have a lot of guys that could step in and potentially give you a good plate appearances on any given day.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the MO of Jed Hoyer. Like he doesn't like all his eggs in one basket. He likes his resources spread out. He prefers depth over like super high ceiling, super high risk. You see that on the pitching staff. You see it in the bullpen every year. We talked about that last episode. But yeah, I personally I would rather have a deep lineup instead of one that tails off 5 through 9, but has a superstar hitting third. So I think we got a glimpse this week of when it's going right, what that could lead to. I'm hoping the slug comes at Wrigley. We haven't really had good hitting conditions at Wrigley so far, but it's supposed to be like 75 with wind blowing out tomorrow. So should be a good day to hit. So yeah, hopefully they can keep it going coming home.
Absolutely. Before we kind of turn the page to the Mets and before we give our one word reactions, I want to have a brief conversation about Shota Imanaga. He looked absolutely fantastic on Wednesday night. 6 innings of work, 11 strikeouts. The swing and miss that we've really seen all throughout his first, I think, 3 starts with the Cubs this season, it has been there. His fastball is up to 92 miles per hour on average. There was a lot of concern surrounding Imanaga this offseason, particularly because of how bad he looked at the end of last season. The Cubs were stressing that, hey, we know what went wrong with him. We're putting in the work to get him back on track. Even with all that said, with all the goodwill the Cubs have built up with reclamation projects with pitchers, no one was really buying it with Imanaga. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop. But through the first 3 weeks of the season, Imanaga's looking way better than he was ever in the Cubs uniform.
Yeah, I mean, like with Cade Horton out, the big question was who was going to be the ace, and it's like, oh man, is it going to be Shota? Like, are we going to get to the end of this season and Jed Hoyer is kicking himself for not going on that 3-57? Like, it's too early to like go down that road. It's 3 starts, but he has been incredible. Just the swing and miss has been so he just looks more confident, and I think it's to your point. Like, he was never really right after he came back from the hamstring thing last year. But hats off to him for putting in the work and really dialing up his game because he's been super impressive. I saw something on Twitter from Brad that showed has made 58 starts in the big leagues. He's allowed 3 earned runs or fewer in 50 of the 58, and he's allowed 7 or more earned runs in 4 starts. But if you look at the other 54, he has a 2.50 ERA as a big league starter. So it feels like, you know, I don't want to say much was made of nothing because, like, as bad as he looked down the stretch last year, it was definitely troubling. But he looks like a different pitcher, and the Cubs need that in the worst way right now.
Yeah, they need the best version of Shota this season, especially because of the injuries to Kate Horton. That's why it's been so reassuring to see that through the first 3 weeks of the season. And like you said, I think it's possible we do get to the end of the season and we think, did the Cubs misevaluate Aminaga once again by not picking up the 3-year club option? Of course, that's not exactly a conversation for right now. Right now, let's put a bow on the Philly series. Jake, what's your one word description to that series? Cubs taking 2 of 3.
I'm going to hyphenate a word. I'm going to say long anticipated. The first 3 weeks of the season has felt like an eternity. It feels like between the poor performance and the injuries and just all the noise around the Cubs, like, it's been such a disappointing juxtaposition to the high we all came into the year on, that just to play quality baseball, take 2 of 3 from a team like the Phillies, it just felt like a weight was lifted. And I'm sure it felt like that for everyone in the locker room too. I know, I think it's either game 1 or game 2, but when PCA hit that ball into the right field corner, I think it was a single. He advanced on the throw, but like I don't know that I've ever seen him look so relieved when he got to second base. It was just like, oh, thank God. And I feel like that was kind of a perfect embodiment of how we all felt. Like I said, just getting to 500 again mentally, I think, is a lot. You've got opportunity this weekend to take care of business, but yeah, long anticipated, relieving, hallelujah. You can go with any of those. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm going with expectations. This week there was certainly a flip in the Cubs schedule. We talked about it last pod. The next 7 series are against all teams that could be contenders at the end of the season. With that, there's going to be a shift in expectations. Now you're expected to be the team many thought you would be at the start of the season, and that's a contender. So along those lines, it's good to see the Cubs live up to that expectation for that series. I also go to expectations because there's 2 players in particular that might be shifting the overall conversation when it comes to what to expect from this Cubs team. The first one, we've already talked about it, Shota Managa. If he truly is better than he was in 2024, that's a completely different conversation when you're talking about the Cubs starting rotation. The second player is Nico Horner. Horner has already got his contract. He's not worried about that. He's going to be a Cub for the next 6 years, but he's taken his game somehow to another level. I didn't think it was possible. He already had the speed, he already had the fielding, he already had the bat to ball. This year, after long anticipation, we're finally starting to see that power. He's starting to drive the ball. I'm not saying he's going to be a perennial 25 home run hitter, but if we get that number from 2 home runs to 15 approaching 20, that's a major different look for the Cubs starting lineup. And it just adds another tool to his belt. And it makes you wonder, wow, they don't have that Kyle Tucker, they don't have that Kyle Schwarber, but if you have Nico Horn at the top of your lineup and you have someone like Dansby Swanson at the bottom of your lineup who's still capable of giving you pop and driving the ball, that's a really good offense to have, and that should be a good thing come October.
Yeah, I think people who are kind of skeptical on the Cubs extension with Horner, I think if he pops 20 homers this year, that crowd gets quiet real quick. That's always been the big knock on his game, is he doesn't slug enough. Personally, I don't. I think he would have got paid more than what he got from the Cubs. I think he would have got paid as a shortstop on the open market. But he has just been dialed in, and I think everyone's starting to pick up steam. I think he is the spark plug. Like you said, he can do it all. He's probably going to win several more Gold Gloves in his career. He's showing that pop. He runs the bases better than anybody. Just kind of like he's kind of just become this like heart and soul guy for the team, and it's on the field, it's in the clubhouse, it's like he really is a guy who's doing it all, and yeah, that honestly one of my favorite players in a long time. He just has this like old school vibe to him where he does all the little things that don't necessarily show up in the box score, but he impacts the game in just so many ways.
Yeah, it's efforts like that from the Cubs offense that's going to have to overcome the early injuries that happened to the pitching staff. Along those lines, let's get into one of the bigger rumors that's surrounding the Cubs this week. Jake, when we first talked about the Cade Horton injury, we mentioned Lucas Giolito. At the time, you and I didn't really think it's something the Cubs would rush to. As a whole, Jed Hoyer doesn't respond to moves or to injuries with another move right away. I think he likes to see how things play out. I think we've seen, for the most part, relative success. The problem is pitchers keep going down. You're now out Phil Maton, Hunter Harvey, Porter Hodge, Jordan Wicks is coming back to Iowa this week. Matthew Boyd should be back. You're still waiting for Justin Steele to really begin his minor league rehab assignment. And with that, there's been a shift in the Giolito conversation. It now sounds like the Cubs and Padres are the teams most interested in him. And most importantly, it sounds like Giolito is no longer expecting a multi-year deal, which is where I think the Cubs start the conversation because they're not going 2 years on Giolito. 1 year, I think they would be willing to do. And if it's the Padres they're going against, John Heyman was on the score today. He mentioned the Padres really don't have money. It makes me feel it's only a matter of time before Lucas Giolito is coming back to Chicago. Jake, do you think for everything that has gone wrong with the Cubs pitching staff in terms of injuries, would a 1 year deal for Giolito at this moment be the right level for Jed Hoyer to pull?
I mean, it's not my money, right? Like you need depth. We've seen that. We went into the year thinking, man, the Cubs are really, really solid depth wise. And it took 2 weeks for us to be like, oh crap, our depth is really pushed to the brink already. So again, I think my big concern is you can't expect him to just come in and by May 1st, he's throwing 7 shutout innings. Like he's not going to do that. He's going to need time to ramp up. So, time is of the essence here, but more guys are going to get hurt this year. They're going to slow play it with Justin Steele. They're going to be careful with Edward Cabrera. That like all these guys, they're probably going to keep an eye on Matthew Boyd. So again, 1 year deal, fine. I don't personally have like insane expectations for him. I don't know that he'll be the dude he was down the stretch in Boston last year when his numbers really seemed to turn the corner. But again, what other options are there out there? Like realistically, what other options are there? If it's a 1 year deal, get it done. You clearly weren't super concerned about the luxury tax this year anyway. If we were having this conversation last year, maybe it's different because we know, they were treating that as a soft salary cap, but bring him in, get him up to speed, and, just see where he slots in.
Yeah, I think managing expectations with Giolito is the first thing I think every Cubs fan should go through. He's not going to come in and be the ace that he once was with the Chicago White Sox. Frankly, we haven't seen that version of Giolito since he was with the White Sox. I think the goal is to get Giolito in the rotation by mid-May, maybe even the start of June. But most importantly, have him be able to take the mound every 5 days. Have him give you at least 6 innings. It doesn't have to be the most quality of work, but if he gives you 6 innings and stays between, say, 3 to 4 runs given up, I think that's the sweet spot because we've seen this Cubs offense can carry a team, can carry a rotation. Just got to keep them in the game. So, with everything that's gone wrong with the Cubs pitching depth already this season, Horton out for the season, Boyd down, Steele down, and now the concerning updates surrounding Jackson Wiggins, which was a potential level that the team was going to pay later in the season. I think you almost have to go to Giolito at this point because if not you, it may not be the Padres, but there's going to come a point this season where another team suffers an injury and pounces on Giolito. And again, he's not going to set the world on fire, but if it's Lucas Giolito or having to use an opener every 5 days, I'm leaning towards Lucas Giolito.
Yeah, you basically need him to come in and be Jameson Tyone. Like that's what you need out of him. And I think that's a realistic expectation. I think it's something he can definitely do. And again, for me, it's you want that rotation depth because then your swingmen can stay in the pen and it lengthens that group out and bridging the gap to Palencia just gets easier. So yeah, I'm all in. Let's just get Judd on the horn, tell him we want Lucas by Monday, get it done. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, we just make it happen, Jed. He already is familiar with Chicago, so you don't have to sell him on the city. You might just have to sell him like, hey, you were pretty uh not iconic with the White Sox, but you were memorable with the White Sox. You were a big part of their success. Maybe it's time for you to do that on the other side of town. I want to shift the conversation. I think there's a lot going right for the Cubs right now. I think, or after the start of the season, this week particular, I think there were a lot of encouraging signs about where they could be potentially headed. That being said, I think there's also still some concerns that have to be talked about. So I wanted to spend some time talking about the player that scares us the most. And I guess I could lead us off here. I was having a hard time with this conversation. Originally, I was going to go with Michael Bush. Bush entered the season with the expectation that he was going to be one of the key pieces in the Cubs starting lineup. And I think there's concern there, but I also have a greater concern, and that's with Pete Crow Armstrong. I'm going to preface this by saying I love PCA, the person. I love everything he means to the Cubs, to the city of Chicago. It's not a question of character. It's not a question of even his emotion. It's a question of the version of PCA, the offensive player that we've seen not just the start of this season, not just last September, but dating all the way back to the All Star break. His WRC plus is in the 70s. He only has 12 home runs. He's striking out around 26% of the time. For those that are quick to say, like, hey, his 2026 struggles, you can't really take much into that because it's only been 3 weeks of the season. His struggles date back several months from last season. It's why I'm a little bit concerned. Not so much that I think the Cubs shouldn't have done the extension. It's just because at the end of the day, if this team is going to be successful, it's going to be because PCA is making an impact with his bat. He's already a positive WAR player because of his speed and fielding. But if that bat's not taking a step forward, if he's not making an adjustment back, that's a concern for me for where the Cubs want to be come October.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally valid. Like PCA is the X factor for the offense. Like stop, finish. Like there's no debating that. You saw that. Look at the Cubs' record last year. When PCA was cruising in the first half, the Cubs were stacking wins. When he went sideways, the offense followed, and he really was the trendsetter last year. And again, I am like putting myself in the camp of it's only been 3 weeks, just mentally and emotionally. It's only been a few weeks. First week and a half, the weather sucked, the conditions weren't great, whatever it might be. I'm just putting myself in that glass half full camp. But I think the thing that, like you said, we can take solace in the fact that like he has a solid floor, no matter what the bat turns out to be. But I think the long-term expectation should be somewhere between the extremes we saw last year. Like
Oh, of course. Yeah.
don't think he's the player. I'd love to be wrong, but like he was so good in the first half last year that it's like that felt unsustainable for any major league player. And then again, just the cliff that he fell off of in the second half. Again, I don't think he's that player either. I don't think the Cubs think he's that player. They wouldn't have had talks to get the deal done. So if he falls
Agreed.
somewhere in the middle and he's a 5-6-4 player for the next 5-6 years, like great, that's awesome. So again, I'm just telling myself what I need to tell myself to sleep at night, Jordan.
Hey, it's only been 3 weeks, so no need to be worried yet, unless you look at his numbers dating back to last July. But hey, let's move on from PCA. Jake, who's your one player that you're most concerned about, or that you're scared about what potentially could be by the end of the season?
I'm gonna go with a little bit off the wall pick here. I'm gonna go Edward Cabrera because he's been really good in his first 3 starts. High walk rate aside, like obviously you'd like to see that dialed back, but it's really scary to think what this Cubs rotation looks like if you don't have Cade Horton and God forbid, Edward Cabrera goes down with another injury, given his track record. I mean, this we're talking about a guy who he brings that elite stuff, and that's what the Cubs rotation has missed for a long time. It's what made Cade Horton so impressive last year. And Cade was learning on the job, so that wasn't even at his peak. But Edward has looked really sharp. He didn't even allow a run until his third start. His injury history is worrisome. It was worrisome when they made the trade, but it's one of those trades that the Cubs did need to make. They needed to get aggressive, high risk, high reward type thing. But man, as good as he's been, and as sharp as he looked, all the things we're seeing and hearing from the clubhouse is that he's amazing in the clubhouse, and he's a really good guy to be around. Like, he's checking all the boxes, and just given the rash of injuries that the Cubs have worked through in the first couple weeks, I do not want to play the let's try and replace Edward Cabrera game.
Yeah, you talked about PCA being the X factor for the Cubs offense. I think in many ways, Edward Cabrera is the X factor for the Cubs starting rotation. If he's truly that ascending top of the rotation starting pitcher that the Cubs have believed he could be for years, I think that does change the conversation of thinking about the rotation without Cade Horton. Because what you're essentially doing is Horton was an ascending ace in the Cubs rotation last year. If Cabrera is that guy this year and proves to be that guy by September, yeah, you still want to have Horton around, but you could withstand the loss if Cabrera is that dude and you have Justin Steele healthy. That's why I do share some concern with Cabrera. I actually have a piece coming up tomorrow just about three players that might have brought on questions you weren't ready to answer this soon. For Cabrera, it's not really anything he's done. He's looked good. Yes, you would like to see him miss maybe a little bit more bats and not walk as much. I think that's part of the Cubs' overall development plan for him. But mostly because of losing Horton, there was added expectation now on Cabrera. He has to be the guy that the Cubs identified for years that they wanted to get into their organization. And if he's not, like you said, that's a scary reality. The good news is his results are there and he's heading in that direction. So I think for PCA for Cabrera, it's two players that, yes, there's concerns, but there's also a belief that they could be what they need to be and get the Cubs to where they need to go by the time the playoffs roll around.
Yeah, 100%. In my mind, as you're going through that, I'm like listing last year's rotation and this year's rotation. And I'm like, okay, if this guy can be this guy and this guy can be this guy. So, like, if Edward Cabrera is healthy and pitches like an ace and Shota keeps up what he's doing, then, like, that's your Matthew Boyd and Cade Horton from last year. That
Exactly.
gives Matthew Boyd a little wiggle room for regression.
Yeah.
And then you round out the rotation from there. But you feel like you're at least even, if not a little bit above where you closed out 25. So
Yeah.
but there's no way to do that. Math does not math without Edward Cabrera.
1000%. To me, I think all throughout the offseason, I think the way the Cubs operated was they wanted to avoid the fate they had against the Milwaukee Brewers, where they ran out of effective starting pitchers to open a game. They used an opener in game 5 of the NLDS. Like, that just shows you that for all the good things that happened last year, there was a flaw in the roster construction. So I think, like you mentioned, I think there's a chance that Shota and Cabrera could be the two top dogs by the time October rolls around. You then got Matthew Boyd, like you said. And then for game 4, game 5, you're looking at a group that could potentially include Justin Steele, Jameson Taillon, Lucas Giolito. Those would all be potential better options than what the Cubs were faced with last October. So again, it's a long way to get from here to there, but if that's truly where the Cubs end up, I think there's a case to be made though in a better spot than they were last year.
And one note on that infamous NLDS against the Brewers. This weekend will mark Freddie Peralta's return to Wrigley for the first time since Wrigley faithful rattled him to the max last fall with the Freddie chants. So I wouldn't mind seeing that again. I would love to see Freddie Peralta crumble at Wrigley one more time.
Bring back the Freddie chance on Friday. Oh, Saturday, I think he's scheduled. So, yeah.
Here for that. I'm going on Sunday. Otherwise, I would happily lead.
Jake, let's close with a concerning topic. It wouldn't be me if I didn't bring some concern to the podcast. We're seeing an unfortunate trend with the Cubs when it comes to their homegrown pitching. Uptick in UCL injuries. It started last year with Justin Steele, but here's the thing with Justin Steele. You can't just look at the UCL surgery he had last year. Multiple times before that, he's had elbow scares. Each time you and I have messaged, this is it. This is when Tommy John is happening. I just know it. I feel it by how the Cubs are talking. He fortunately, those times it wasn't the case. It finally came around and got him last year. Horton, little bit of a different story. The Cubs drafted him already knowing that he had Tommy John surgery. He had a shoulder and back injury in 2024. So injuries have always been in the background when talking about his potential at the major league level. That being said, this season, UCL injury. Porter Hodge, you and I both thought there was one point where Porter Hodge was going to be the anchor in the bullpen, the future closer. How just last season I thought he should be the closer over Ryan Presley. His career has taken a dramatic turn since then. He too is getting UCL surgery. And now there's some fear surrounding Jackson Wiggins. He's on the IL with elbow inflammation, I think the Cubs are calling it. The most concerning thing is that he's not even pitching at the moment. He's not really doing anything at the moment. That's not exactly a good sign for where this could be headed. I think we've seen this blueprint before, with how we saw it with Horton. Jed Hoyer was finally forced to talk about this, address the elephant in the room, as you put it in your article today. The Cubs have to look into this problem, right?
No question. Like, I was like half joking when I said like the Cubs haven't developed like steady pipeline of like big league quality pitching in our lifetime. Like, I turned 35 in a couple weeks. That is a long time to not solve this problem. But I think another point that was really important in the piece I wrote is that nobody is or could be more motivated to solve it than Jed. Like, his long-term job security depends on it, frankly. They've got to sort this out. I think to your point about like they drafted Cade Horton, like they've drafted guys with elbow issues in the past, and Jackson Wiggins falls in that bucket. He had Tommy John before they drafted him too. So
Yep.
it's like, okay, well, if you're an organization that can't overcome these past injuries circling back around, you might want to also rethink your draft strategy, because they haven't had one of these, oh, he was hurt, but he had it taken care of and we're good now. They haven't had one of those work out. So yeah, I have no faith that Jackson Wiggins is not going to end up missing the season. They were so careful with him last year. There was just these chunks of the season that they shut him down to try and control his innings, and the dude has never sniffed close to 100 innings in college or in pro ball, and his elbow is still apparently just falling to pieces. So yeah, it's a major problem. I would say, organizationally speaking, it's probably at the top of the list. They've got to sort this out. They've got to figure out what the problem is, because it's just not sustainable with the Brewers and the Reds and the Cardinals and the Pirates. Like, they are all building farm systems that, frankly, are in stronger position than the Cubs. So if you can't start developing arms that can help you, in the next 5 years, you're going to be playing behind the 8 ball in the division, and you're going to be forced to overspend in free agency. You're going to be reliant on veterans. You're going to be looking for like those Matthew Boyd types that, like, again, you're playing the, oh, if he could stay healthy game. And it worked last year, but it's a dangerous game to play. You need to, and it's an expensive game to play too. So yeah, it's a major concern. And again, it's not that I thought Jed was ignoring the problem. Of course he isn't, but it was nice to get that, out in the air.
For as great as the Edward Cabrera trade was, that shouldn't be the blueprint for how you go about acquiring a top of the rotation arm. I'm going to say this time after time after time. I don't fault the Cubs for the trade. I appreciated the urgency they acted with in terms of giving up Owen Casey to get Edward Cabrera. Here's the thing. As we've talked about through the first few episodes of this podcast, the Cubs farm system isn't that great right now. They don't really have a blue chip prospect at the moment. There's potential that last year's draft class, there's a couple pieces that could potentially blossom into those blue chip players by the end of the season. But between Matt Shaw graduating, Cade Horton graduating, Moises Ballesteros at the major league level, It's really just Kevin Alcantara and a whole bunch of dudes, Jackson Wiggins, of course, and a whole bunch of dudes that could be something, but also not quite the top prospects we've seen across the division. The cleanest way the Cubs can go about improving their farm system is to one, fix this problem. You have to identify what mechanism within your pitching development is off. What aren't you spotting with these injuries, with these concerns that keep popping up with the pitcher's elbow, and correct that. And then you have to identify the right college pitchers. I don't regret the Cubs for taking a chance on Horton or even taking a chance on Wiggins. We've seen Horton how electric his stuff is. And had he been healthy, dude probably would have been a Cy Young candidate this year. But again, we're playing the had he been healthy game. So organizational health has to be through pitching prospects. Pitching prospects will give you a homegrown ace. Like you said, you then don't have to overspend in free agency. It's the cleanest way to keep your books. And then it allows you to have resources to do other things, whether it's pursue the top position players on the free agent market, use some of those excess pitching prospects in trades. It's just what should make your organization grow. Unfortunately, the Cubs haven't had that crutch to stand on for a very long time. The farm system has always been led by position players. And the hope is we eventually get to a point where that changes, but it's not going to change until they figure out this UCL trend.
Well, we haven't seen it in our lifetime, Jordan, but maybe our kids will.
Hey, my kid already saw a Bears playoff game, Bears beat the Packers, and a Cubs playoff series. So she's off to a really good start when it comes to being a Chicago sports fan.
She has no idea what's laying in wait for her. She all she knows is winning. She has no idea the darkness and despair that awaits her.
Who knows? Maybe Kate Horton will be her next Mark Pryor. And that note, we're going to end the podcast. We'll be back with you on Monday following the Cubs series against the New York Mets. A quick note, we are going to move things around next week. Monday episode will remain in place. We will have an episode on Wednesday night instead of Thursday night. Jake, I think we're ready to open the doors. Tuesday, I am going to post on our socials, ask us anything, see what our readers' biggest questions on the season are. You and I will spend some time answering those questions.
I love it. Power to the people.
Power to the people. See you next week.